Hello, everyone. Simon Jacobson here for another episode of Meaningful Live. The United States, united. But why are we so divided? That's what we'll be speaking about. This program is dedicated, happy birthday, to our dear friend Mark Belinsky. Dedicated in honor of your remarkable generosity and long-standing friendship with the MLC. Thank you so much. Most obvious question. Now we're coming close to the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country in 1776. 3 more years. So it's 247th, which we just honored on July 4th. Country called the United States. United. So you would think we would be more united than ever, especially after all our gifts and blessings, economically, technologically. I mean, an empire, a country like no other in history, one that served as a haven for so many different minorities, individuals, people coming from different countries, immigrants, that built this great country. Yes, we have challenges with our history. Not everything was done exactly right, to put it mildly. But at the end of the day, a country that has brought tremendous gifts and blessings to the entire world. The billions of dollars of charity, of aid and support that the country provides to other nations. A country known for its kindness. And there's so many virtues to this country. And yet, when you look around, you see division more than I've ever seen in my lifetime. I think there was always division. People were always driven by self-interest. It's, as Winston Churchill said about capitalism, the same thing with democracy. It's a terrible system, but I've never found a better one. You see other types of systematic, of different governmental structures that have been far more corrupt, far more oppressive. So there are many virtues, but there are also plenty of challenges. So I'd like to speak about that. And it's something that affects us all. You just turn on the news and you see the polarization. The polarization even in the media. The media, which was meant to be somewhat neutral, try to provide us with some objectivity, perspective on what's going on. The politics, the corruption that goes on. And you get jaded, you get cynical after a while. It's a soap opera. But it would be a soap opera, would be not that bad. That's a television show. This is, however, reflects a reality. People cannot speak to each other about certain matters. You talk about certain lightning rod topics or names or individuals. I don't even want to mention them because that alone could be polarizing. And you see how people just shut down others, cancel others. In the name of what? Why can't we have a conversation? We can disagree. We can agree to disagree. So it's good to get to the heart when you see a problem like that, where there is such divisiveness in so many areas. It's good to get to the bottom. What is the secret to finding unity? Do we all have to be the same? Do we have to be clones in order to get along? Can we indeed find harmony within diversity? The country does, after all, use the Latin term. It's on all our currency, e pluribus unum. From the many, pluribus, plural. One, unum, one. Indeed, the very name United States comes from that concept. Because every state could have been a nation of its own, a country of its own. And we see what happened before the Civil War, the secession of some states declaring that they don't want to be part of the United States anymore. They'll be their own entity. But at some point, everyone found, even in the name of self-interest, that it would be better to have a type of synergy of the different states. And the states do indeed have somewhat autonomy, but yet they all have some allegiance to the larger good of the entire country. That itself is somewhat of a miracle. But it holds, and it's made the country stronger, not weaker. So what we really need to get to is what is the heart of it. Because clearly, just because we're economically successful, I'm not talking about the ups and downs of recessions and the economic downturns and upturns that are a natural part of the process. But generally, a country that's prosperous, high standard of living. The comforts in this country are just incomparable. Travel to other countries. I'm not talking about to the hotels where they want their guests and visitors. I'm talking about just living in other countries. You immediately appreciate the amenities, the comforts, the ease of finding things, of getting things in this country. It's getting better in other countries as well, but it all really begins with the United States. So you would think having all those blessings would make us even more harmonious, even more cooperative. But you see, that's not the case. So I think this is a study more than just economics, it's a study of psychology, understanding human beings. Where do you find people united most? Just let's talk a hypothetical scenario. You'll see when they're fighting together for a same cause. So the United States resisted entering World War II for many different reasons. But then when Pearl Harbor was struck, and it became clear that this wasn't just an attack on Europe, it was an attack on a free world, and ultimately it was going to affect us all, suddenly there was this unity. I'm sure there were always detractors, but overall the majority, a unity. Not just those that went to actual war, our young men, but also in the United States, the whole industrialization, the whole production machine that the United States created, ammunition, weapons, artillery, resources, because a common cause was reached. What was the common cause? We're fighting evil, the fascism of the Nazis, of the Axis, of the Japanese. It was very clear. For many it was clear before, but then once it became clear, that united people. So in other words, a cause that's greater than self-interest. Because look, in the big debate about capitalism versus socialism. So on paper, hypothetically, which is why Marx attracted so many, especially intellectuals, it sounds great. Everybody joins their resources in one pot. Everybody earns as whatever they earn. It goes into one collective treasury and then allocated to each person according to their needs. Utopian, messianic. But it didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't work for many reasons. But above all, who's going to watch over this treasury? It would have to be individuals. Those individuals, could they be trusted? Well, they abused power more than anyone did. Until, to use communist ideology, until the entire world would become deprivatized and all property and all belongings would belong to the collective good, to the collective whole, who would be the steward? Who would watch over that? So there are all kinds of different arguments. At the end of the day, nobody could be trusted. So that's why Churchill said what he said. Capitalism, on the other hand, yes, it's driven by profit. It's driven by greed even, self-interest. But if you put the right checks and balances, you can at least keep it at bay to some extent. But if you don't have this self-interest drive, people are not going to work hard. As the argument goes, but I'm not going to get into details not relevant to our direct discussion. But it does come down to what is the human being. Are we fundamentally selfless people or selfish people? If we're selfless people, then why should we be divided? But clearly we have a selfishness and self-interest. Don't be deceived by those that say that they have a certain liberal attitude or a conservative attitude to something, but if it's not my way, it's either my way or the highway, and there's no tolerance for others. Don't trust that they are humbly and selflessly representing the higher good. It's a good that they think is the best. That's the whole problem when everybody thinks that what they know, that their belief system, their values are the right ones. There's always some self-interest involved. That's fine, as long as you acknowledge it, and as long as you realize there are other people that have self-interest as well. And if you really want coexistence, you have to, therefore, give and take. There has to be some negotiation. Or if that negotiation, there has to be an understanding that we can have different opinions. Once you see a certain element of, if you're not for me, you're against me, a personalization of opinions, meaning I personalize, I demonize you because you don't agree with me, because I have an absolute monopoly on the truth, you know that the ego and the arrogance has gotten out of control. So to go back, so what is the formula? What we see is when people, their self-interest suddenly comes together for a greater cause. So I would submit the following. The more comfortable we are, the more prosperous we are. That's not a guarantee for a united states, for a united front. Because that just creates even more selfishness in a way. It also creates apathy. The key, to use a word from the Kabbalistic and Hasidic lexicon, is bittul, B-I-T-T-U-L. The idea there's something greater that I'm dedicated to than myself. When we can join together, we'll call it transcendence. Transcendence, that drives toward unity, toward love. Let's take it on an individual basis. We see two people fall in love and they say they can't live without each other. Soulmates, eternal. And 2 years later, they're fighting in divorce court, ready to kill each other, ready to get each side to kill each other. You hear from attorneys that attorneys, even coming from two different sides, they sit down and peacefully have lunch. But when it comes to divorce, in most cases, they can't do that because their clients will not tolerate that. It becomes personal, vindictive. All the worst and the best comes out of people. So what happened to the love? Because love requires an element of transcendence. It's not just about me. When this country was founded, as I said, plenty of faults. The founding fathers have their flaws. But one thing that united them was the oppression that was coming from Great Britain, the memories of religious oppression from Europe. And they were adamant to create a country that would never tolerate that. All men are created equal. The word created was not coming from a religious perspective. It was coming from an equalizer, that there's a transcendent force that's greater than all of us. And actually, interestingly, that itself was undermined slavery. At the time, they weren't aware of it. But it became pretty obvious, because if all men are created equal, how about men of different color? But they put those principles in there. What united them? It wasn't just self-interest. It was a self-interest that joined together for some greater cause. We find these truths self-evident. All men are created equal. And by virtue of the Creator have inalienable rights. And those rights were given to everyone equally. Equally. So do we need to have crisis and war to unite us? Let's definitely hope not. That's not the case. But there's nothing that crystallizes your values more than when you have to fight for it. When you don't take it for granted. When we take things for granted, when things are going smooth, you don't have to fight for it. That's when apathy settles in, and apathy always will lead to some form of corruption and ultimately to the divisiveness that we see. I'm not going to be oversimplify and say there's only one cause for it. There's plenty of other forces at work. But it does come down to self-worship. So I would submit this. As you probably know, when I say the word God, I don't mean the God that most people think of. In the words of Levi Yitzchak Badichever to the self-proclaimed atheist, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. I'm talking about a transcendent force that's greater than the sum of the parts. If you don't have that in life, you can't have true love and you can't have true unity. Yeah, maybe temporary, short-term for the interest it serves. But long-term, for something to be lasting, sustainable, requires that transcendence. Now you'll say, 1 second, I may have that, but other people don't have it. So how's that going to unite us? It doesn't work that way. You have to make a determination. Are you going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? The more of us that stand together and say, I have no problem hearing another opinion, but there's also my opinion, and there's also other opinions. Yours is not the monopoly. And if you come down to it, you'll see self-interest, some type of prejudice, something that I'm gaining is at the heart of most of the situations. Yes, it'll be packaged in nobility and in kindness and in compassion and in charity and in benevolence and altruism. But no, there's self-interest if it's not allowing for another approach. Because nobody has a monopoly on truth. It comes from a greater and higher place. That's what I see witnessing. And the more you see that, you'll also see the lack of respecting things that are sacred. And I say sacred again, I don't mean from a religious context. Things that are considered to be sacred. Relationships, commitments, devotion, trust. Yes, it does reflect itself in relationships. And this is not advocating marriage per se, it's advocating the respect for commitment. Once you will lose that, because I have personal interests, and I remember once speaking to a scientist, and I said to the scientist, I understand that you consider, he was very anti-religious, but we were friends. He said, I understand that you claim that religious people are biased. They trust in some invisible, unknown God. They're primitive thinking. Everything is, they're judgmental. You know, all the different things. And they grew up with it. They're biased. They're biased. They're not open-minded. Free inquiry. The heart and soul of science. Because they have interests. Whatever their God is, their religion, their community, their communal interests, their individual interests. But you are a scientist, and are you telling me you're totally objective? I can prove to you that there's a very strong case to be made not to have a God in one's life. Why? Because God, a true God, would mean accountability. Why would I want to be accountable? I want to do whatever I like. Why would I have to be accountable to some invisible or unknown God? That's also self-interest. That's also driven by a subjective bias. And he refused to accept that. He refused to acknowledge, no. And then, interesting, I found something from Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley writes, I'm just paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact quote, but he writes something fascinating. He says, I want to begin, before I talk about my ideas, I want to make it clear that I am biased, I'm subjective. I don't want to be accountable to a God. I don't want to be accountable to any higher force, especially in the area of sexuality. And that informs my opinions. I respected that. I respect that greatly because he acknowledges a disclaimer. I sent this piece to that scientist. Interestingly, he did not argue. He said, I hear you. So it's important to understand nobody has a monopoly. Everybody on truth. Everybody has a certain subjectivity. That's what allows us to have conversations. When someone says, no, I'm objective, but you're subjective, there you go. It's a non-starter. But let's go back to the central theme, e pluribus unum, the United States. We're divided because we begin and end with ourselves and not a deeper and higher cause. That's the key to all success in life. Personal, collective, yes, also on a national level. So where do we begin? Even if we don't have the power to legislate and begin from the top down, begin from the bottom up. A grassroots movement, a grassroots revolution. That you and I make a determination that we're going to advocate this. Over the years of my teaching, I've made it a policy. And it comes natural to me. It wasn't even an effort. I will always allow any question to be asked to me. I will allow anyone to state any opinion. If it's offensive or arrogant, so I'll try to call that person out on that. But not to silence anyone, even if it's an opinion that's completely different than my own. But unfortunately, often you meet people who are not ready to do that same with you. There's either predetermined conclusions, like people first, they shoot the arrow, then they build a target around it. But we have to all look at ourselves as part of one sacred, greater tapestry that's greater than the sum of the parts. And that we are blessed to be and honored to be part of that greater symphony. We're musical notes, we're musicians, indispensable in the larger cosmic symphony. That's the basis of finding harmony within diversity. And we can all begin with ourselves, how we look at ourselves, how we look at others, how we share, how we even argue. You can argue in a very pleasant way. Yes, you can be passionate, but never personalize. Besides the fact you don't know what other people are going through, why should it be personalized? You have an idea, share the idea. Someone may have a different way to look at the idea. Can we make change? If enough of us do this, even in our own small circles, it creates a ripple effect. It's a voice that needs to be heard. I should say a voice, all of our voices that need to be heard. And there's no doubt it can be achieved. Two big examples, look at your own body, a healthy body, Look at nature around us. It's filled with diversity, not just diversity, so many forces that on their own would seem to be possibly clash with each other. And yet there is a profound harmony. Even when you talk about predator and prey, remember, interesting rule in nature. The more an animal is consumed, the more it propagates. The more number they are. There are much more vegetable on this earth from the world of vegetation than there are animals. And there are much more smaller animals than there are larger animals. That's how it is. And in many ways, when the predator goes after the prey, they're also controlling the prey should not overrun her. I remember in Yellowstone Park, I think when they eliminated, or at least they minimized the wolves, there was such abundance of elk. And they ate up literally everything that was growing. It created a nightmare. So we don't know, the balance is a mystery exactly, but there is a balance. The same thing as in the human body, so many different parts, but all working together in a healthy person, please God, that works toward one harmonious whole. So we have examples for it all over. The thing is, with a human being, we're not musical notes. We have opinions, and we have positions. And that's what can get in the way. But maybe call me a dreamer, but I do believe that enough of us put our minds and hearts together and our souls together, and we can recognize the indispensable value in each one of us. Even sometimes in hearing an opinion different than yours can also help you crystallize your ideas, and maybe sometimes change your mind or at least modify things. And we see how we cross-pollinate and create something much more greater than the sum of the parts, a transcendent higher truth. That, my friends, is the secret to unity. And division is a direct outgrowth of insecurities, ego, arrogance, everything that is the opposite of experiencing ultimate transcendence. So, it's not a surprise that our currency, only one on the whole earth, that says, in God we trust, in transcendence we trust, and e pluribus unum, they're interdependent. Thank you so much. Simon Jacobson here, Meaningful Life Center. MeaningfulLife.com is our website. Please subscribe to our growing YouTube channel. Please share. And of course, love to hear your feedback, thoughts, comments, suggestions, ideas. Yes, and even other opinions, rebuttals included. Always great speaking with you. Being together. We're here every Sunday, this particular program, but we have many other programs throughout the week on different topics for different audiences. Check it out at meaningfullife.com, a wide array of topics and programs. Everyone be blessed. And I look forward to cross-pollinating. I look forward to finding that synergy with each one of you, and hopefully you with me, as we can create that most beautiful cosmic symphony. Thank you. Be well.